Hello, hello! So, if you watched any of my past RV videos, you would know that my husband and I and our 3 kids went on an RV trip last summer and we learned so much. So this video that I'm going to go over today are all the questions that you need to ask the person or company that you're going to be renting your RV from before you either make your decision or before you go on your trip. So come along.
Welcome to VO's Travel. Where to go and what to see. With kids.
Okay, so like I said before, we went on a 3-week RV trip with the family out west last summer and we had a blast. If you're on the fence, just go. It was so worth it. But I'm going to go over the questions with you that you need to know the answers to before you actually either commit to renting your RV, or let's say you are trying to decide between 2 or 3 different companies or RVs, and you'll want to ask these questions and get these answers before you make your decision. So the first question you need to ask is, do you provide linens? Think pillows, blankets, sheets, maybe sleeping bags. Some RVs will come completely bare and you'll be responsible for filling your RV with bedding and linens, and think towels, beach towels. Other places will provide them for you free of charge. The person that we rented from was amazing. She had everything that we needed, and she went over the top trying to make our trip as comfortable and as at home as we could. And I will leave you her link before if you are traveling out of Colorado. She was from the Denver area. And also, some people or RV companies will provide the linens for you, but they'll charge you. And I do have another video out about all of the costs associated with RVs, and those fees are listed in that video if you're interested. So the second question you need to know the answer to is, do they provide kitchen pots and pans, utensils, plates, cups, all of that stuff that you need to eat in the RV? Once again, some RVs will come completely bare and you'll be responsible for stocking it yourself. Others will provide it free of charge, and then yet others will provide it, but there will be a fee associated with that. So another question you need to ask is, are there camp chairs in the RV? If you're in the middle of an RV trip, you will be staying at campsites, I'm sure, and you will want camp chairs to sit around the fire or just to hang out outside. Once again, some places, some RV companies or people that own the RVs, depending where you rent it from, will provide those for you, others will not. And if that's the case, you will need to run to Walmart and buy some cheap camp chairs so that you have places to sit when you're outside. If you are a coffee fan like my husband and I, you will want to know what the coffee situation is. So you'll want to ask, is there a coffee maker in the RV? Is there a Keurig? Is there a pour over? Is there a French press? Of course, you'll be able to find coffee shops along your route, I'm sure, but you'll probably also want to know what the arrangements are, or if there are any coffee options in the RV, and what kind of coffee you'll need to take. One thing to keep in mind is there's not a lot of storage in an RV. If there is a coffee maker, that's going to take up a lot of counter space, so just something to keep in mind. Does the RV come with an inline water filter? And this is a little bit more on the technical side, but an inline water filter will filter all of the water coming into your RV. A lot of times in an RV, you'll be staying at campgrounds, and the campground water isn't, I'm sure some people like it, but it's probably a lot of times going to be well water. And that inline water filter, if you are planning to drink the water that will be coming through your RV, an inline water filter will help clear some of that water up and make it probably taste a little bit better. Also, showering in campground water, all of those things. So an inline water filter is not a necessity, but it will help the quality of water you have. You will want to ask if there is an adapter for a 120 volt electricity cord, or for the electricity cord that comes with the RV. When you are in most campgrounds, there is a specific cord that comes with the RV that will plug into the source at the campground to get electricity, and that's a different type of cord than we're used to in most homes. So a 120 volt cord is one that you will see in a typical American home. And when you'll want to use that, potentially, is, for instance, when we were on our trip, we stayed 2 days at our friend's house. They had a little pad that we could park on beside their house, but we were able to use that adapter and plug our RV straight into their house electrical outlet. So that 120 volt adapter will let you plug your RV into just a normal American outlet. You'll want to ask if the RV comes with a generator, and if so, how long or how many hours can you use that generator per day? A lot of RV companies or people that you rent your RV from will give you a 4-hour-a-day limit, and that usually is plenty. But if you go over the time frame that they give you, they will charge you for it. So that's something to keep in mind. And you will need a generator for instances that you are boondocking. Boondocking is when you are at a campground that does not have any electricity or water hookups, or if you stay the night in a parking lot like a Walmart or a Cracker Barrel and don't have electricity that way. That generator will give you electricity for the time that you are without. Another question that you might want to ask is if there's a backup camera on your RV. It does make driving a lot easier when there's a backup camera. It's not a deal breaker, I don't think, but it would be nice to know whether you have a backup camera or not. Something else you need to ask is what happens in the case where the RV might break down or get a flat tire. First, you'll want to know who is responsible and what happens if the repair takes a lot longer than anticipated. Are you going to be sitting at the repair shop for 3 or 4 days while the RV is repaired, or will they replace the RV for you with another one, or do they have roadside assistance? So you need to be prepared for things like that. Something else you'll need to ask that is good to know is about insurance. Insurance was outrageous when we looked to rent our RV. We were going to pay over $1,000 for our 3 weeks of renting the RV. However, we did contact our private insurance company, and we were able to get the same insurance for $60 total for the entire 3 weeks. So ask the person that you're renting from, can you do your own private insurance? You'll have to go back and forth, and they will require certain things to be covered in certain amounts, but using your own private insurance will save you a lot of money if they will allow that to happen. You will want to ask the owner, how long will it take them to go over teaching you all about the RV once you get to the RV? If you like to plan your days a little bit more on the specific side, like I do, you will want to know that time frame so that you can kind of figure out how long that will take and how much of your day that will take up. I think our person told us that we would be there with her for about a half hour, but we asked a lot of questions and we were there for definitely over an hour with her learning about the RV. Another question you'll want to ask is what is expected of the RV when you return it? Do certain tanks need emptied? Do other tanks need filled up? In regards to the water tanks and the gas tank, what about cleaning? Do they expect the whole thing to be cleaned by you? So you'll just want to know those expectations before you rent it so you know how to return it and avoid any kind of fees that they might associate with tanks not being the way that they want them. Something else you can ask is if you are renting the RV for an extended amount of time, ask them for a discount. They will probably have a daily fee listed on the webpage that you're searching on. And if you go to them and say, hey, I am interested in renting your RV for 2 weeks and not just one, can we have a per night discount if that's the case? And that is something that we did, and that did save us a lot of money. Something else you'll want to ask is how many miles are included in your RV rental. Some people will give you a certain number of miles per day, and if you go over that, they charge you per mile. Others will give you unlimited miles. And again, that's another thing that you can kind of go back and forth with and ask the owners whether they will consider giving you unlimited miles or not. That can save you lots of money as well. Something else you'll want to know is the entertainment system. Is there a DVD in the RV? Is there a TV? Are there streaming services? Especially if you're taking kids on this trip, you'll want to know whether you should bring DVDs along or whether you can stream movies. And of course, there's plenty of other things that your kids can be doing while you're driving, but let's face it, on a really long RV trip, sometimes you just need to turn on a movie. So just kind of know what options they have in the RV in regards to that. You will want to ask how many miles per gallon the RV gets, and that will help you budget-wise. I think I mentioned earlier, but I do have another video all about the costs associated with RVs. If you would like to budget for your trip, which is a wise thing to do, you'll want to know how many miles per gallon you'll get in that RV. And one thing to note, if you are traveling up and down mountains, your miles per gallon will be a lot lower than if you're just driving on flat land for the day. Something else you'll want to know about the RV are the dimensions. How tall is it? How wide is it? And how long is it? And when that comes into play is, especially in some national parks, maybe not always national parks, but there might be tunnels that you will be driving through. And you'll want to know what the height requirement or height restriction is on those tunnels. Another thing to keep in mind is Glacier National Park. They have Going to the Sun Road. And yes, if you're not familiar, the name of the road is Going to the Sun Road. It is amazingly popular and it is an amazing drive. But they have extreme vehicle restrictions on driving that. Your vehicle has to be under 21 feet long. It has to be no higher than 10 feet tall and no wider than 8 feet wide. And if your vehicle does not fall within any of those requirements, you are not allowed to drive on that road. So just know the requirements. Also, if you're going to be going to any drive-thrus, you'll want to know the height of your RV as well. Something else you will need to ask is about the deposit. What kind of deposit is required and what form of payment do they want that in? Do they want it in cash or do they want a credit card number? And obviously a deposit is almost always required on an RV rental, and that will cover the owner from small things that might happen during the trip. And obviously if something does happen, they'll be able to take the cost of that out of your deposit. But just know how much that deposit is and whether you'll need to have cash for that or a credit card. You will also want to ask about the cancellation policy. If you cancel your RV rental by a certain date, will you lose some money or will you get 100% refunded to you? Sometimes they'll refund 100% up to a certain date, and then after that, if you cancel, you'll only get 50% of your money back. But those things completely range and are completely different per company and per RV. So you'll need to know the cancellation policy. Something else you will want to know is what kind of charging outlets are in the RV. There will probably be a typical plug in the back of the RV, but when you're up front driving, are there just USB ports or are there cigarette lighter ports? In our case, we had a new RV that we rented, but it still had a cigarette lighter port, so we needed to take a little attachment with us, and we actually took one that had 2 USB ports in it to get the most out of the plugs that were available. So you'll want to ask what type of plugs there are so that you can have the correct attachments for all of your devices that need charging. Something else you'll want to know is how many seat belts are in the RV. And also know you will want to research the seatbelt laws in whatever states that you'll be driving in because they do vary by state. Obviously, there will always be seatbelts in the front 2 seats, but what will differ a lot is how many seatbelts will be in the back of your RV. Lots of states don't require people to be buckled in the back of the RV. Some states do. So always ask how many seatbelts are on there. If there's only 2 seatbelts in the back, but you have 3 children, that could be a problem. And lastly, think about how you will be getting the RV. When you rent it, are you going to be driving to that location to pick up the RV? And if that's the case, where are you going to park your car for your entire trip? Or if you're flying to your location, as we did, we flew from the Midwest to Denver. We were obviously in an airport. Will you be required to hire a driver to take you from the airport to the location where the RV is, or will they drive to the airport and pick you up? So things like that you need to know. Also, at the end of your trip, will you be required to take your RV somewhere, or will they meet you somewhere, maybe at a hotel that you've booked for that last night? So just be prepared for potential travel costs associated with driving to and from the RV when you get it in the first place and when you return it. So that about sums up my questions. If you have any other questions that you have experienced, maybe you've rented an RV before and you have thought of other questions that may be good for potential renters to know, please leave those in the comments. Thank you so much for coming along with me. Like I said, I do have a few other RV videos in this series, one about all the costs associated, one about things you need to pack for an RV trip. I have a couple more coming up. One will be just general questions and answers that my husband and I will go over. The last one I believe we plan to do is one on campsites, what you need to know about campsites when renting an RV. And if you hit the notification bell, YouTube will alert you when my new videos do come out. So thank you so much for coming along with me, and As always, I hope that you remember to choose joy and take all of the pictures.